And I'm going to let everybody in.
My mom. Where are there two? Oh my God.
Yeah. All right. Welcome everybody. I'm just going to give this a chance to get everybody in the room. Sometimes it takes a couple seconds and I'm sure folks might still be trickling in, but welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Lara Zakaria, and it is my pleasure to have you tonight for this presentation. We're going to be talking about nutritional approaches for improving our immune balance, and we're going to be really focusing about allergies today. In case this is the first time that we're meeting, I'm an integrative pharmacist and a nutritionist. I'm also known as the foodie pharmacist, hence the name. And the whole deal, the whole jam is how do we use diet and lifestyle in order to improve our health? And how do we use that to really support our health goals? And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Sara Gibbons. Sara is a recent graduate from the University of Bridgeport with her master's in nutrition. Woo, very exciting. Congratulations, Sara. Not a small accomplishment. And we've been working together in my clinic. She has been working on some projects with me, as well as helping me see some clients as well, and has been doing a tremendous job. She's going to be talking us through all the various aspects, and she's going to be talking us through the immune system, how it functions, and then get into all the nitty gritty and the reason that we're all here, the different foods that could be really helpful for allergies. In the meanwhile, I'm going to be hanging out in the chat and be talking to all you. So get your fingers ready and take this opportunity, in fact, to warm them up and let me know where you're all joining me from, and start getting ready to put your questions in and your comments in. I love reading those as we're talking things through. We are going to leave some time for some Q&A in the end. I'm trying to keep this really engaging and a two-way conversation and try to get through as many of these questions as we can. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is towards the end, we're going to talk about a rainbow challenge that we're going to do in June. It's going to be a free challenge. It's meant to be a month-long group program for helping us to really expand and diversify the food that we are eating from day to day. If you've heard me speak, I talk a lot about eating the rainbow and diversifying your diet and how it helps improve everything from your gut health and your hormone balance and, of course, your immune balance. And so you'll see when Sara's done how it all fits in, but you'll get more information about that at the end, and you'll get an email since you're all registered for this. Okay, without further ado, I will let Sara jump in and take it away. And I see you guys already typing in the chat.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you to everyone for joining this evening. I'm mostly going to be doing the talking for the first little bit, but as Lara said, I want this to be as participatory as possible. So if you have any questions, definitely put them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. So I wanted to start off with this slide, or really this question, which is, what do these things have in common? These things being food and environmental allergies, sensitivities to odors and scents, getting sick often, having frequent rashes or skin irritations, food sensitivities, gut issues like IBS, or maybe reactivity to FODMAPs and autoimmune disease. So broadly, really what all of these things indicate is an imbalanced immune system, and particularly an immune system that is in an over or hyper reactive state. So as a nutritionist, when I encounter somebody who has many or even all of these symptoms, it really indicates to me that I need to focus on how to balance their immune system and really work towards having their immune system be in a more balanced state versus boosting their immune system. And I'm going to talk about that distinction a little bit later. I have an asterisk by autoimmune disease just because I'm going to be focusing primarily on allergic conditions, so seasonal allergies, things like that, which really is related to one specific part of the immune system. Autoimmune diseases are more specific to a different part of the immune system that I'm not really going to go into great detail in this presentation. But again, if you have any questions about those, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. So given that kind of focus on the kind of hyperreactive immune state and the overreactive immune response and allergic conditions, there's a few main topics that I'm gonna focus on. So we're gonna start with the foundations of the immune system, do a very brief kind of overview because it's pretty complex. Then I'll move on to the gut immune connection. Then I'm going to talk, like I said, or make the distinction between immune balance and immune boosting and why I argue that it's a little bit more important to be in a balanced state. Then we'll move on to the kind of practical application of all of this information that we'll learn. So foods that we can use to really foster a balanced immune system. Then I'll move on to some nutrients and herbs that we can use particularly to manage seasonal allergies. And then finally, I'm going to very briefly touch on cross-reactivities between certain environmental allergens. So like pollen and grass are really, really high right now in the Northeast. And talk about how certain foods that you eat may kind of exacerbate your allergic reaction to those allergens. And like we said, we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So we're going to start with the immune system. So the human immune system is a very vast and complex collection of cells and tissues and organs that coordinate the body's responses against an invader. I don't love using war-based analogies, but I think it's helpful in understanding the basics of the immune response here. So we can start by imagining our body as a country, and then we can think of our immune system as the army or sort of the patrolling force that is, looking out for any potential invaders that are trying to invade. And when I talk about invaders, I'm talking about a few things. So there's things like pathogens, so bacteria, viruses, fungus, all things that actually could create sort of harm in the body. I'm also talking about food allergies, so things that foods that certain people can have really significant and severe allergic reactions to, anaphylactic reactions, the things like peanuts and shellfish. And then I'm also talking about perceived threats, which is really what I want to hone in on in regards to seasonal allergies. And what I mean by perceived threats is that the particular part of the immune system that I'm going to be focusing on launches the same kind of response to these harmless substances as it does to pathogens. So while these substances may not pose like an actual threat, our immune system, or the part of the immune system I'm focusing on, really kind of launches the same kind of reaction to those things. And I also really want to make the distinction between food allergies and food sensitivities and reactivities. And I'm kind of grouping environmental allergens into the food sensitivity category. With food allergies, there really isn't much that we can do about it. It's a permanent thing for most people, and there isn't a lot that we can do nutritionally. Versus with food sensitivities, reactivities, and environmental allergens, there's a lot that we can do to kind of dampen the immune response, especially through targeted nutrition and supplementation. And so now that we have a better understanding of what these invaders are, I want to talk a little bit about what they are encountering when they are attempting to invade the host. So the first thing that is happening is they are encountering what we call these first lines of defense. So that's going to be physical barriers like our skin, mucous membranes that line the sort of internal channels in our body, even the hairs in our nose. They're all going to attempt to try to not have these various invaders enter. There's also chemical barriers. So think of saliva, tears, stomach acid, Stomach acid is particularly good at creating a really inhospitable environment for these invaders and working to eliminate them. And then in the chemical barriers, there's often also enzymes, and these enzymes work to break down these invaders and destroy them. These first lines of defense are usually quite effective in making sure that the invaders don't enter the host, but if they are able to kind of move past them, then that's when the invader is going to encounter the more significant immune response and the two sort of main parts or arms of the immune system, which are the innate and adaptive immune systems. Great. So these are the two kind of areas of the immune system that I'm focusing on. While they are distinct, there is really significant overlap and interplay between the two of them, much more so than is shown in this image. So we first have the innate immune system, which is represented by this purple circle. It is made up of 21 different cell types and is really fast acting and thought to be non-specific, which basically means that it offers generalized protection against any invader, regardless of what the invader is. So that, I think, is an important point when we think of seasonal allergies and even food sensitivities, that the immune response is going to be launched regardless of if the invader is actually a threat or not. So with allergic type diseases, it's usually due to an overreaction in the innate side of immunity. This differs a little bit from adaptive immunity, which is a slower and more specific kind of immunity, meaning that it remembers previous encounters, and then when it encounters that invader again, it can work to sort of destroy it more effectively. When the adaptive immune system is in overdrive, that's when we can kind of encounter autoimmune diseases, which I mentioned a little bit in the beginning. And again, that's not really something I'm covering in this presentation, but just wanted to make the distinction that I'm really kind of focusing more so on the innate immunity, and then autoimmunity is more specific to adaptive immunity. And I'm not going to go into great detail really about, all of the different cell types, but I did want to highlight one cell in the innate immune system, which is the mast cell. And those of us with allergies have probably heard of this cell before. The mast cell is one of the histamine releasing cells, and histamine is a chemical that plays a really central role in initiating the immune response. So essentially, histamine acts as a messenger that alerts other immune cells that there is an invader, that there's an issue, and they should come and deal with it. And in doing so, in those kind of cascade of reactions that involves histamine release, it creates these allergic symptoms like constriction of airways that leads to like wheezing or issues breathing, abdominal pain, rashes, redness, runny nose, all of those things that we're familiar with allergies. So with allergies from a nutritional perspective, mast cells and histamine is an area, is often an area to target when trying to use a food and herb approach to manage seasonal allergies. And so in addition to histamine being in mast cells, it's also created or produced in the gut, which kind of brings me to my next point, which is the relationship and the interplay between the immune system and the gut. This is another sort of incredibly complex interplay, but distilled down, essentially, if the gut is not functioning optimally, the immune system and our overall immunity will be really significantly impacted. So when we're talking about ways to support the immune system, it's really crucial that we also look at the gut and the health of the gut. And by the gut, I'm really referring to two kind of major things. The first thing being the intestinal mucosa, which is the mucus-covered lining of the digestive tract that, like the skin, sort of acts as a barrier between the external world and our bodies. And in this image, it's represented by the yellow cells that are, as you can see, sort of form a barrier or a wall. The gut, when I'm talking about the gut, I'm also referring to the microbiome. So that is the collection of the kind of quote unquote good bacteria that we have that I've sort of highlighted in red where they're depicted in this image. And they have many immune specific roles, including producing upwards of 70 to 80% of our immune cells, which is pretty impressive. All right, so I'm going to offer sort of another analogy here as we attempt to kind of understand the interplay between the immune system and the gut. So if we go back to this idea of the body as a country, you can think of the gut as a major city, even the capital, arguably. The intestinal mucosa is the infrastructure, so the houses in the city, and we can think of the mucous membrane as, let's say, the wallpaper that is inside all of the houses. The community members are the microorganisms. And so like with any community that is sort of functioning optimally, everyone is happy and healthiest when they have safe and undamaged homes, when there's diversity in the community, when the members are able to all do their jobs successfully. And when this occurs, the members are communicating with each other and with their government, i.e. other parts of the body, that everything is okay and there's no need for the army, i.e. the immune cells, to come and, have to clean anything up. And so we can see with this image on the right that there is, it shows a structurally sound intestinal mucosa, as well as the commensal bacteria, those communities of microorganisms, which, is indicating that everything is sort of like happy and healthy. This differs from when we have, if there's an imbalance in the infrastructure in the city, like a damaged infrastructure, like significantly crumbling homes or holes in the wallpaper, or, when that's happening, then the members of the community will send signals to the other parts of the body, to the government, that there's a problem, and which would indicate that the army needs to come in and solve the problem. And so we can see again with the image on the right that when there are breaks in the intestinal mucosa, we can run into issues with there being sort of easier access for invaders to come in, pathogens, things like that. Or we also run into issues with the patrolling immune system mounting a response that causes further damage to the infrastructure. So really, I'm not really sure if that analogy works amazingly, but the main points that I want you to take away from that is that if the gut is not in an optimal place, both in terms of structural integrity and of the actual community of the microbiome, it's going to impact how well we can defend ourselves and how intense of an immune reaction and symptoms we have as well. So really what I'm suggesting is that we really want to be seeking immune balance and gut balance for that matter. So when we want our immune system to mount a response, it's protective and it's necessary. We just don't want it to become too intense that it is chronic or it causes more damage than is necessary. And this is especially important in people that are already in kind of like a hyper overreactive immune state. And so if there's too much immune response and we attempt to boost it, which is really the narrative that we have, especially in cold and flu season, it's just likely going to cause more issues because it's sort of like stimulating an already overstimulated system. So we're really seeking balance more so than we are attempting to boost anything, especially for those that are kind of already in a quote unquote boosted place. And a great way that we can work towards this immune balance is through food and nutrition. Before I get into the kind of specifics of what this looks like, a super important point that I want to make is that immune balance does not happen overnight. The best way to experience balance is by focusing on supporting our immune system year-round so that we can really lay the foundation so that in seasons where we are encountering more invaders, our body is better prepared to respond and doesn't create such an exaggerated response because we've been working all year to kind of make sure that everything is in an optimal place. So again, just to say that immune boosting it can be helpful in some circumstances, but it's really balance that we're seeking. And that is something that we have to be pursuing year long. And so there are many, many ways that we can achieve this balance. So I've just listed out a few that I thought were important. The first being eating mostly whole food diet, because you also want balance in your diet. So that would be foods that are sort of closest to their original form. So fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, various animal proteins. And then a sort of step beyond that is that we also want to strive to eat as many colors and variety of these fruits as possible to ensure that we're getting the amount and the variety of the vitamins and the minerals and the nutrients and the phytochemicals and all of those things that are really important in supporting the different aspects of the immune system. So eat the rainbow is a way to kind of think about that. And something that we'll be focusing on in our challenge. And a good way to enact that would be to, if it's possible for you, to eat seasonally, because it kind of gives you, it sort of inherently is rotating the different kind of produce that is available to you. And eating with diversity is also a really great way to support your gut, which is sort of my next point. And so eating with diversity, making sure you're getting enough fiber, incorporating fermented foods like miso, sauerkraut, things like that into your diet, as well as pre and probiotics are going to be really helpful in, again, supporting your gut, which will then in turn help balance your immune system. And then lifestyle factors also play a really important role in immune support. I'm not going to go into great detail about them here, but again, that's going to be something that we're going to talk about in the Rainbow Challenge meeting. So if that is of interest to you or you want to learn more, definitely make sure to sign up. Great. So now I'm just going to touch on a few vitamins that I think are particularly important for the immune system. The first is vitamin D, which is, I'm naming the conductor just because I think it is really an important kind of immune modulator, which essentially means that it can dampen or reduce an overreactive response and enhance an underreactive response. It's challenging to get solely from food and from the sun, especially if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, but you can get a little bit in salmon, mushrooms, and eggs. And for that reason, it's often something that nutritionists can recommend supplementing with, but that's something to certainly be in conversation with your doctor about, and just make sure that you're dosing with the right levels if you choose to add a supplement in. The next is vitamin C, which many people are probably familiar with in regards to the immune system. This one I'm calling the neutralizer just because its primary role is as an antioxidant and in neutralizing free radicals, which are can cause cellular damage. It also functions or has some mast cell stabilizing activity, and also is super involved in collagen formation. And collagen is really important for strengthening and rebuilding the gut lining. So again, kind of going back to the importance of gut health and immunity, and vitamin C is sort of involved in that, supportive of that. And it's found in high amounts in kiwi, broccoli, bell peppers, strawberry, kale, snow peas, tomatoes, and others, but those are just some highlights. Next is vitamin A, which I'm calling the regulator because it plays a super important regulatory role in immune responses. It also is involved in strengthening mucous membranes and stimulating the production of immune cells. And it is found in high amounts in liver, cod liver oil, mackerel, salmon, kale, sweet potatoes, basically orangey colored vegetables. And then we have zinc. So zinc is protective against small intestinal injury, gut permeability, and also is anti-ulcerative. So again, it's really helpful in terms of maintaining a good gut barrier, maintaining the integrity of the gut barrier, all of those things that again are really important in making sure that our immune system is working optimally, and it is found in high amounts in oysters, shellfish, red meat, seeds, especially pumpkin seeds, legumes, and eggs. And so while we definitely want to lay the foundation with food, sometimes we need things in sort of more potent doses, which is where nutraceuticals really come in handy. And I think those are really especially helpful kind of within seasonal allergies, within certain heightened allergy seasons. And so I just wanted to highlight, again, there are many to choose from, but I just wanted to highlight a few that I thought were particularly important. The first being quercetin, which is sort of, you can think of it as a natural antihistamine. So it does a good job of stabilizing mast cell membrane. So again, making sure that there isn't sort of too much or inappropriate histamine release. Stinging nettle also works to stabilize mast cell membranes and also helps to inhibit inflammation that contributes to allergic symptoms. NAC, or N-acetylcysteine, helps to thin mucus and reduce histamine. Those with asthma might want to be a little bit careful with NAC, but otherwise pretty safe. And then bromelain, which is found in pineapple, is able to break down proteins and prevent them from making more histamine. So again, there's sort of a histamine focus here, and dosing with therapeutic doses can be really helpful in managing those seasonal allergy symptoms. So now I'm going to go into this idea of environmental cross-reactivity, which is basically illuminating that there are certain, during the highest periods of time when the environmental allergens are kind of most in the air. So for right now, grasses and pollen are really, really high in New York and in most of the Northeast. There's an argument that some foods can kind of exacerbate your allergic response to those, which again is not saying that you need to eliminate these foods forever, but with people who are having significant allergic symptoms and allergic reactions, it can sort of mitigate your histamine loads by eliminating some of these foods during these allergy seasons. So with grasses, if you're having a lot of issues with them, you might want to consider eliminating chard, orange, watermelon, wheat rye, tomato, things like that. And similarly with tree pollen, which is, as I said, really, really crazy in New York right now, you may want to consider, just for the time being, eliminating apple, apricot, carrot, celery, cilantro, nectarine, parsley, peach, things like that. And again, just to say, not something that you need to be eliminating from your diet permanently, really just during these periods when you're really suffering from these particular allergens. So that's sort of essentially the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to leave you with a few key takeaways. The first being that we're really seeking immune balance versus really trying to significantly boost our immune system, especially if we're already in sort of a hyperreactive allergic state. And this immune balance is something that we're working towards year round. Again, you can think about that you're really laying the foundation so that once you do encounter these invaders or things that are going to create an allergic response, the response can be reduced. A way that we're able to work towards that balance is by a whole food, nutrient-dense, colorful diet, high in vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A, zinc, and also really focusing on supporting your gut health, as well as those lifestyle factors that you can learn about if you come to the Rainbow Challenge meetings. With allergens, you may want to consider some therapeutic doses of these different herbs and nutrients. And also you want to maybe consider being a little cautious of cross-reactivities between certain high allergen periods and certain foods. So again, just a little reminder that if you are interested in learning a little bit more on this subject, and especially on lifestyle factors and how to really integrate more color into your plate and your diet, we're going to be running this Rainbow Challenge for the month of June. We have these dates up here that are tentative, but if you've signed up for this, you're going to get an email that will explain sort of the challenge and how to register for that a little bit more. So thank you.
Awesome job, Sarah. Snaps all around. That was, I mean, The topic of immune balance is so complex, and I think you did such a great job of like making it accessible. And I as violent as the analogy of thinking about like the war analogy
Yeah.
is, it really is what's happening inside our body. And I love how you brought it back to these communities that make up our microbiome, because that really is the foundation of our health. I don't know if you guys picked up on the fact that she said 80% of your immune system starts to be made in your gut. That's sort of like that first domino. And so if there is an issue in that production process, if there is reactivities, if you're not getting enough of the nutrients that you need to for those basic building blocks, if those little communities of microorganisms of all the bacteria, the good and the bad bacteria, are out of whack, that's going to throw the whole thing off balance. Go back for me 2 slides to that summary slide you had. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-summarize. We got a couple of great questions. I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds to put in more questions into the chat, but essentially I'm going to tie it all together with a bow for us here, right? So you talked a little bit about how there's 2 arms of the immune system. One arm of the immune system is sort of in charge of this allergic response. We didn't talk about the autoimmune piece. We could certainly always circle back to that, but that's sort of there's a whole other like department that's in charge of that. But this main allergy part basically gets overstimulated, and as the seasons change, and depending what you're allergic to, what else is going on in your environment, you essentially get these phases of increased allergic response. There's a little bit more to that too. Like, for example, in New York City, this is common in a lot of cities in the United States. They only plant male species of trees. And they do that because the female species, by the way, did you know that there's female and male species of trees? Something I learned relatively recently. But they only plant the male species because the female species are the ones that fruit. The male species are the ones that pollen. And they do that so that there's less cleanup, so you don't get as much fruit on the sidewalks and stuff. And as a result, we have an excessive amount of pollen in the city, which is why we're so, especially over the last few years, we have been so overwhelmed with the amount of pollen. So that's part of the issue here in the Northeast. And I don't know if this is relatable to folks who, because you guys are spread out, that are joining us tonight. So there are some other factors that play into this. Your genetics will play into this, your own body's immune balance, where you're starting out with, your nutrient balance, where you're starting out with, all of that plays into it. And so from there, what we want to do is set the stage. And this is where you're talking about having just a foundation of a whole food diet that tries to get as much variety as possible in, because that's going to help set up all of those pieces. Like, it's essentially going to set you up for success so that you're feeding the immune system. You're also feeding all the microbiome. You're setting up a good foundation for your digestion so that you're going to get more nutrients out of the food you're eating. It's just like a win-win situation. Then from there, we drill down a little bit more. And then we talk about specific nutrients like vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A or beta carotene, zinc, right? You talked about specific compounds, nutrient compounds that actually neutralize histamine, right? Histamine is the response that causes those allergies. So we talked about quercetin and actually vitamin C. Both of them have antihistamine properties because they help reduce the amount of histamine that's being released. And so that helps to reduce some of your symptoms. So all of these kind of work together in combination to not only help balance your immune system and support your gut, so you set that foundation, but then you can use some therapeutic targets. You can even aim for higher amounts if you need supplementation to really get the effect that you want. So that's where something like stinging nettle comes in. You could use bromelain, NAC, you could use more therapeutic doses of quercetin and vitamin C in particular to really get the effect that you want. Awesome. So keep your questions coming into the chat. I'm going to go in order. There was a question here about zinc. Joanne was asking, can you talk more about zinc and how you would take zinc, when you would take zinc, so we can maybe like review the foods that you can eat that are great sources of zinc, and we can talk a little bit about supplementation as well.
Sure. Yeah, so food-wise, high in shellfish, oysters, red meat, seeds, pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are a great one. I think, something you can throw on salads or things like that. I think Lara maybe can help me dosing wise, but I
So
think that
dosing wise, we go between 15 to 30 milligrams daily is generally considered safe. Most like multivitamin type products won't have a whole ton of zinc in them if they have zinc at all. If you get a good multi-mineral, it might have a little bit of zinc. Usually it's somewhere between 7 and 15 milligrams of zinc in it. And you want to be careful. I usually look for zinc glycinate or zinc bisglycinate. That glycine is an amino acid. They basically attach it to the zinc. It makes the zinc much more absorbable. And always, trust me on this, always take it with food or else you're going to be so nauseous. So nauseous, not fun. I don't generally recommend supplementing zinc on its own unless you know you have low levels of zinc or you just need a little boost for a short period of time. That's generally pretty okay. I usually try to rely on zinc from diet, because if you supplement too much zinc and your zinc to copper ratio gets out of whack, that could cause a whole other set of issues. So we want to try to keep that balance. And by getting it from your food, you're more likely to keep that balance. Again, if it's a short period of time, or you're taking it just like while you're working on your gut health, or you're taking it just while you're boosting, working on your immune system, like during allergies or during the winter or something like that, that's generally okay. And Joanne, let us know if that answers your question, or if you want us to talk more about zinc, happy to do so. Okay, there was another question here. This is actually an interesting question. I'm going to read it as is. It's a little bit longer, so hang with me as I read it, and I want to make sure I get it right. Which this is from Kristen, and she's saying that she has some IgG food sensitivities, but her clinician determined she doesn't actually have leaky gut. So a lot of food reactivity showing up on a food sensitivity test, but they've determined not a leaky gut. Kristen, can you tell us if they did a stool test? Is that why they're saying that you don't have leaky gut? Maybe you could type that into the chat, or you're welcome to also unmute and talk to us too if you want. How do we get the body to so that you can expand to eat those foods again? So reduce your sensitivity to those foods. And you've got 2 tests, super frustrating. You're eating clean, you're trying to get all the probiotics in, and it sounds like you're really just like not getting very far, but you're suspecting maybe it's a histamine intolerance. Yeah, let me know if you're comfortable unmuting and jumping on. I'll let you do that. But I'm curious if you've done a stool test already, and if that's how they determined whether or not you have intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So leaky gut, you guys, for those who don't know what that is, essentially what Sara was talking about before, when there's gaps in the barrier of the gut lining that creates more inflammation. Essentially, that's where the immune system starts to attack the lining of the gut, and so you start to get more gaps. I think of it like a slinky. If you guys remember, like when a slinky would get broken and it would just stay open, it would no longer walk down the stairs. That's essentially intestinal permeability. There's too many gaps. It's not functioning. It's not like closing and opening the way it's supposed to. And so things leak through that aren't supposed to leak through. That tends to create more food sensitivity and more food intolerances. It also creates a disruption in the balance of the good and the bad bacteria. And as a result of that imbalance, you start to see sort of the downstream effect of all that. A lot of people will get like IBS type symptoms, gas, bloating. Sometimes you'll get intolerances to like histamine or FODMAPs. Some people will develop things like SIBO. All of that happens from something that we call, as a general term, dysbiosis, or an imbalance of the gut bacteria. And then as a result, as Sara explained, that will throw off your immune balance. So it's like a really vicious downward cycle. So what I would personally do is, since I'm not sure if they ended up doing a stool test, often if there is an excessive amount of foods intolerances, one of 2 things is happening. Again, dysbiosis, something's happening in the imbalance of the bacteria that's throwing off your immune response. 2, there is nutritional deficiencies that are throwing off your immune response. So something is essentially telling your immune system that it needs to attack, and we need to address that and rebalance it. For some people, taking out those foods temporarily and then resetting the gut, we do essentially a a GI reset to help like reheal the gut. We take out everything that's sort of irritating it for a temporary amount of time. We address the underlying issues. If there's overgrowth of bad bacteria, we'll address that. We'll rebalance the gut microbiome, we'll address the gut lining, and then we'll gradually reintroduce those foods. And for most people, we can get them to retolerate all those foods. But for others, you'll have other triggers that are essentially aggravating your immune system. So if there's other environmental allergens, stressors, honestly, you should, I mean, Sara, you alluded to the lifestyle factor, stress itself, issues with your circadian rhythm, imbalances in your hormones can also play into the picture. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but sometimes for some people, there can be other factors that have to be addressed. In my experience, when somebody starts to develop histamine intolerances, it's very often tied to a combination of some hormonal stuff, as well as some issues with the microbiome. And I usually start with setting a foundation with nutrients. We sort of rebalance the immune system with nutrition. Then we go in and we address the microbiome, and then we go in and we address the hormones. And that's sort of how we build on expanding the diet. I know that was like a long-winded answer. I hope that started to address it. Kristen, let me know in the messages. Oh gosh, there's a lot of messages now.
Hey, Lara. Hey, Lara.
Yes. Hi.
So anyway, yes, I had a stool test last year, and then again, and I did have a round of about 3 different antibiotics back to back, which probably, took that, and so that could have been when things started. That kind of makes sense. It would make sense that
100%. So the antibiotics happened, and then your sensitivity started to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, but they've always kind of been there. I had just started noticing I've been nauseous more when I eating certain foods, and unfortunately, it's like 7 of the 8 major food allergen, even though I'm not. So it's like even anything processed, anything like soy, sunflower seed oil. I mean, corn, everything.
Everything sets it off.
Aggravating, and it's like, okay, I'd like to be able to go to an Asian restaurant and enjoy myself without feeling bad for a few days.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
So I'm sorry. Did you say you did do a stool test, or you didn't do a stool test?
Yeah, I did. It was low, and I actually did it through with a dietitian, and it wasn't it wasn't like a GI map or anything. I did one of those a few years ago, and it did show some intestinal permeability, but she's like, you're like one of the best stool tests I've ever seen, because she's like doing a gamut of a bunch of different people. I'm like, really? But I still struggle with constipation, bloating, and things too. So it's just kind of aggravating. She's not really knowing, and I think I'm going to start on DAO enzyme to see if that maybe helps break down if there's any.
DAO could be really helpful. Just be mindful that it's, in my opinion, it's a temporary fix. So if you're going to start, first of all, they're super expensive. So to do it for long term is just not sustainable. So that's number one. Number two, they can be super helpful. If you do notice they're working, then that does answer your question that it's a histamine issue. And again, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, there's dysbiosis. Something is. Think of like histamine, like it's a sink that's overflowing. And so your drain is essentially not keeping up with the histamine that's being produced. And that's a combination of what's happening from the bacterial imbalance and your body's enzyme not keeping up with the demand. So that's why I say it's usually a combination of something needs to be addressed from a microbiome perspective. And at the same time, there's usually a hormonal piece. Estrogen will sometimes also compound that issue. So that's usually been my experience. When we address those 2 aspects, usually we see your histamine tolerance improve, and then your food tolerance in general improves. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, let's see. All right, we got that one. My allergies are cumulative in nature. I can handle a lot more foods. Typically, there are times of the year. Yeah, so that was so the comment here from Jen is that certain times of the year she can handle more foods, and that's what Sara was alluding to about certain times of the year where you are, if you are, for example, you have a lot of grass reactivities in the summer, like you're a summer allergy person, there are proteins in the grass that look like the proteins in the food. And so your body sort of like overreacts to those foods. But if you ate those same exact foods in the fall, you'd be fine because you're not overreacting to the grass. So I find that could be cyclical. And if you're really symptomatic, it could be a useful, quick little trick for you to use. There's a controversy about effectiveness of pre and probiotics. What's the best way, whether it has microbiome balance or structural integrity issues? Okay, so great question. Love this question. Thank you, Janet. So remember, prebiotics are the fibers as well as the polyphenols that are in our food. That's why we're harping so much on color, right? And eating the rainbow. Probiotics are the active food compounds. Sarah, you mentioned sauerkraut and miso, kimchi, right? Those are going to help feed the microbiome. Those are going to help to basically like plant seeds in the microbiome. Let's put it that way. So the prebiotics feed the microbiome, the probiotics plant seeds in the microbiome. You can take supplements that are probiotic, of course, like they have specific strains of bacteria. You could take supplements that are prebiotic. And in fact, you can even take supplements that are called postbiotics. And postbiotics are the metabolites that those little bacteria are making. They actually, those metabolites, other bacteria will take those metabolites and make something out of them. So those are called postbiotics. So you've got pre, you've got pro, and you've got postbiotics. So the research shows that when you supplement probiotics, they have a temporary effect. They only work as long as you take them, as opposed to when you eat your probiotics or when you eat your prebiotics. And as a result of that, you get a more long-term sustainable change in the microbiome or in that neighborhood that we're talking about before. Prebiotics, very often people will take like a single fiber, or you'll get a Metamucil, and that's not like a real fiber, that's a synthetic fiber. The real trick is getting as much different kinds of fibers. And again, can't emphasize the importance of these polyphenols in the foods enough. There's such a complex communication that's happening. And again, these are little neighborhoods and they take a lot of different diversity in order for them to thrive the most. And if you are having like issues, so some people can't tolerate all of them. That usually means that you have an imbalance in the microbiome that has to be addressed a little differently. But generally speaking, for those of us that are just looking to generally improve the balance of our microbiome and improve our gut health, generally speaking, just pushing towards more diversity in your diet first and foremost, getting as much of the fermented foods, the traditional fermented foods in your diet as much as possible. That's going to be your most important strategy. And then if you need to add supplements, then we supplement from there. But know that that's usually a temporary fix. We don't necessarily want to rely on that as the only way that we're addressing our microbiome. So I hope that addresses that question, Janet. Let me know. I'm trying to get through lots of great comments and chats in here. And Sarah, feel free to jump in. I'm going to read through some of these comments. Feel free to jump in with any other thoughts if I missed anything there. If someone consistently gets allergies pretty badly, does that imply a weak or immune system overall? Sarah, I'm going to let you take that one.
Sorry, can you read it again?
Yeah, if someone consistently gets allergies badly, so someone has severe allergies every year, it's really bad. Does it mean they have a weak immune system?
Yeah, so that is, I would argue, is actually probably an overreactive immune system. What I was sort of talking about in the beginning, that it's sort of in a heightened state. So that would be a great example of someone that could benefit from focusing on a more balanced immune system. So making sure that the immune system is still reactive, obviously, because it's something that we need, but not in a place where it is overreactive, like kind of like that you're describing, which is that you're getting these chronic and severe allergies. So it's sort of focusing on immune balance more so than a weakness in the immune system, I think would be where to kind of prioritize there.
Yeah, I would agree. So this is where, again, like going back to those antihistamine type foods, your quercetin, your vitamin C, stinging nettle would be really useful for somebody like that. And then again, setting that foundation with things that, checking your vitamin D level, making sure you're getting enough vitamin A and beta carotene. By the way, vitamin A and beta carotene are the same. They're in the same family. So we turn beta carotene into vitamin A, or we eat vitamin A from animal sources. So beta carotene is the version we get from plants, usually the orange and the red foods, and vitamin A is the one that we get from animal foods because they've already converted it for us. But so when I say beta carotene and vitamin A, I'm sort of using them interchangeably. So that would be kind of like setting that foundation to help support that balanced immune system. And I would suspect there's probably also, again, like what's happening with the gut. Is there a balance in the microbiome? Great. I suspect my food allergies are closely related to environmental allergies. This is Kelly. I'm allergic at this point to most foods as well as most plant trees, forever congestion. Oh, that sounds so frustrating. And GI issues are so hard to get help. Most docs are completely clueless. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Just recommend allergy meds every day, which doesn't sit well with me. It's impossible to avoid corn. Oh my gosh, you really are trying to like get in as much food as you can. That could be really frustrating. I don't know if you've already tried, Kelly, doing an elimination diet, and particularly a diet that focuses on these cross reactives. That might be helpful, although it might be a little annoying to do. But that is really frustrating. Well, and I'll say this generally. I don't know if you're asking this as a question or more so just sort of sharing your experience. But I will say that folks that have this issue, again, generally, the first thing I would do is work on your gut health and address whatever's going on in terms of your microbiome. The second thing that we would do is address any other sensitivities. Sometimes for some people, it could be your body's overwhelmed because of either a chronic infection, or for some people, it's like something like Lyme, or they have like a viral infection that they can't kick or something like that. That has been reactivated or re-triggered for them. So that could play into also their immune balance issue. And then for some people, again, it could be a hormonal piece too. Again, for women, that happens a lot, where you get these sort of overreactions from the allergic disease side that are playing into something that's going on with their estrogen balance as well. Sara, do you want to add anything to that?
No, yeah, no, I totally agree, and think that having a real inside of the elimination diet, if that's something that you choose to sort of pursue, really focusing on those gut healing nutrients too can be really helpful. Just to make sure that you're supporting that, in addition to making sure that you're taking out the things that are sort of causing the stress on the system as well.
Absolutely. And it's worth repeating too, whenever we say elimination diet, that's never meant to be the solution long-term. If you're ever put on an elimination diet, that ideally should have an exit strategy. So, 4 weeks long, 6 weeks long, 8 weeks long. And then from there, there's a plan to try to reintroduce those foods, or it's cyclical in nature. You're going to remove those cross reactives, in April and May because they are cross reacting with pollen, but then you're going to reintroduce them come summer. So there should always be an exit strategy. And the goal is always for us to try to, again, eat as much diversity and as much new foods as possible. So we don't want to be eliminating too many foods, because that just makes it that much more challenging to accomplish that.
Definitely.
I've tried elimination for a year and it was great once I reintroduced symptoms return. So Kelly, that tells me that it sounds like you're onto something. There are some cross reactions happening there, some sensitivities happening there. And you have to kind of go a step behind that, address why you're reacting to those things, right? Whether it's intestinal permeability, microbiome issues, is there hormonal issues? Are there some nutrient deficiencies that have to be addressed? Whatever is going on. And then hopefully from there, we should be able to reintroduce those foods and get your sensitivity back up. And it's really, in my opinion, again, really important because one, it's really hard to be on an elimination diet forever. Like that's just super hard. Number two, again, it's just so much harder to get diversity if you're kind of forced into this like limited diet all the time. And three, you can actually increase your sensitivities long term. So for example, like somebody could, if you could start off with a sensitivity to, let's say, I don't know, corn, and then you leave it out long enough and now your body doesn't want to have it back. And so you sort of develop a more serious reaction to it long term. So we want to be mindful too that we're not making your immune system more sensitive in the process. So it could be tricky for sure. Awesome. Any other questions? We got a couple more minutes. If there's we could probably take one more question. There's a question here about hemolymph therapy using peptides. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. I have to look into that. I have not seen it. I've not seen peptide therapy for hemolymph specifically. So that I don't know. I'll have to look into it. And if it's interesting, I might post about it on social media. So stay tuned. I'll take this opportunity while you guys are thinking. If you have no more questions, or if you have another like last minute question you want to squeeze in there, I'll keep an eye on that. But you will get information if you're interested in doing the Rainbow Challenge. The first time we're going to be running it, we honestly were just like talking about it. It'd be kind of fun for us to kind of get an assessment of how we're doing, because I know I'm not perfect. Far from it. Far from it. So kind of like getting getting an idea of where we're at, and then just week to week working like in a group to challenge ourselves to just add more color and more diversity and figure out ways of making it practical too. I find that like when we share ideas, we're more likely to like be inspired to get it done. So that's sort of the inspiration for this challenge. And I think what I'll do moving forward is we'll do one like twice a year. This is a good time to do for spring, summer, because we're getting new produce for the summer, and then maybe do another one in the fall into winter, because I think we start to go like, oh, I don't know what to eat. There's so much less produce. And so that'll be fun to do one that challenges to eat seasonally in the fall and in the winter as well. Awesome. Well, Janet, thank you. So you'll get an email with the information. It's totally free to join the challenge. Sara will be leading it. She'll have a couple of Q&A sessions as well that you guys can join and ask questions and share your information. And there'll be like a weekly kind of like, okay, here's what we're going to get done this week. A couple of tips, reminders, and suggestions to just kind of keep it going. And hopefully together we can all work on increasing our food diversity. I love the idea of a rainbow challenge. Thanks, Julia. Let's have her. Yeah, we've all heard eat the rainbow. And like, what does that actually mean? So we're going to get it done together. I love it. Amazing. All right. I'm going to hang out here for a couple more seconds. You guys, if there's no more questions, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Sara. Huge round of applause. Big snaps. Amazing job tonight. Thank you guys for joining. Really appreciated the great discussion. You guys had such awesome questions. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're both on Instagram. And if you have any questions, or just, keep us posted on how things are going. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.